Hey everyone, Wolfman here and welcome to first ever video on this channel. Now, before we get into our list, I just wanna say that I mainly made this video for people who are looking for an MMO. So if you are looking, or maybe have a friend or a family who is looking for a recommendation, you've come to the right place. And with that said, let's go to number 5, which is business model and pricing. Now, Guild Wars 2 is buy to play MMO. Sure, there is free version that is sort of like a demo, but a lot of content is locked behind expansion, so you can't really consider Guild Wars 2 free to play. Latest expansion was 30 euros, and considering that today's AAA titles are somewhere around 50 to 60 euros, Guild Wars 2 is actually pretty cheap. But still, you might be wondering, why should I pay for an MMO, when there are a ton of free to play MMOs on the market? Now me personally, I like to stay away from these games, because just from my own experience, they either end up being dead, and it's kinda sad when you realize that your interest in a game outlives the game itself. And this already happened to me quite a few times. But what's even worse is when they become pay-to-win games. So you might be wondering, how does this happen? Well, they will usually introduce some kind of, gear upgrade or some gemstones that are enhancing your stats through cash up, which means you can either grind for them or you can purchase them with real money. And in the beginning, you will be able to catch up, but over time they will just keep introducing more and more items like this. And you will have this illusion that you can catch up, but in reality, you will be constantly outgeared, and what usually happens is you end up being like a fun toy to these rich people. Now there might be some decent free-to-play MMOs out there, just because I haven't found one it doesn't mean there isn't any. But from my own experience, I stay away from them. Now before we move on to number 4 on our list, I just wanna quickly go over subscription fee-based MMOs. And me personally, I think this model is extremely outdated, and especially price-wise. And unless we are talking about World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy, which already had huge fan bases behind them, I don't think such an MMO could survive in today's market. Now just to give you an example, I paid 30 euros latest Guild Wars 2 expansion. And on top of that, for roughly 2 years, all content updates are free for me. Now, let's say instead I played subscription fee-based MMO and I had to pay 10 euros per month. That's 240 euros compared to 30 euros that I pay in Guild Wars 2. How do you justify such a huge price difference? Like, I don't know, what do you put 10 times more content? I just don't think that's even possible. And just to sum this all up, I think buy-to-play model is right in between these two horrible business models, where I don't feel ripped off like in subscription fee-based MMOs, but on the other hand, I'm also not a freeloader, and at least I'm somehow contributing to future development of MMO. But I think I talked enough about this, and we can go to number 4, which is Guild Wars 2 progression. Now, to be honest, before I played Guild Wars 2, I had no idea about these all different progression types of MMO. And in fact, the MMOs that I played before it were what's called vertical progression MMOs. Now, if you are not familiar with this term, this is your most basic progression type of MMO, where you have your levels, and each level requires more experience and more time to complete. And then expansion rolls out, they move level up, and then you need more and more experience. And that's it, that's basically what vertical progression is. Now, on the other hand, we have horizontal progression, where each level requires you like similar amount of time and similar amount of experience. So for example, from level 30 to 31, you will need almost same time as like from level 60 to 61. Now, not only did Guild Wars 2 abandon vertical progression in favor of horizontal progression, and by doing that, they removed this boring and tedious grind that is present in most of the MMOs of today. But they also never moved the cap past level 80. Level 80 is still max level as it was 5 years ago when games came out. So what do you do after you are level 80 in Guild Wars 2? How do you progress your character? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I present you the bubble progression of Guild Wars 2. Now, I know this sounds a little bit silly, but I couldn't find sort of like a better way to explain what's Guild Wars 2 all about. Now, this picture represents my own Guild Wars 2 progression. Your picture will probably look completely different from this one. Like, I know players who are only playing as PvP, or there are players who are only playing War vs World. Then there are communities who are just interested in fractals and raids. But that's the beauty of Guild Wars 2, you don't have to play all of it, you can just play whatever you like. It just happens so that I like to try everything, but that's just me. Now going back to this picture, let's take a look at, for example, SPVP. How do you progress in SPVP in Guild Wars 2? Well, there are a ton of achievements and titles you can unlock. You can make legendary armor, you can make legendary backpack, you can progress on ladder, you can progress in tournament. Same with World vs World, you can make legendary armor there, you can make even legendary backpack. I don't know, you can unlock prestigious titles, achievements, there are World vs World abilities. Now, I don't want to go through all of these because it would just take too long time, but I do want to go over masteries because this is true successor to vertical progression in Guild Wars 2. So how do masteries work? Well, instead of going from 80 to 81 in Guild Wars 2, instead you learn how to glide. Then to gain another level in another MMO, in Guild Wars 2 instead you learn how to use jumping mushrooms. Or you learn how to glide better, you learn how to glide longer, you learn how to use gust of winds to propel you further up in the air, or eventually you learn how to use your mounts, different type of mounts, then you teach your mounts new abilities. But to sum this all up, I think Guild Wars 2 progression has so much variety that if you ever get bored of one thing, you can just jump into another and do progression there. And if you compare this to, I don't know, some of generic MMOs out there, where you are progressing probably by grinding same 5 mobs for hours. I don't know, I just think there is no comparison. And for me, it would really be difficult to go back to that style. And now, let's go to number 3, which is scaling and reward system. Now these two seem like an odd pair to put together, but in Guild Wars 2 they both serve similar purpose, and that is prolonging life of older content. Now if you think this is not important, I will give you 2 examples, one from World of Warcraft and one from Guild Wars 2, where players showed great desire to play older content. So about a year ago, and by the way this was big news on the internet, Blizzard actually sued a small group of people who were owning private vanilla World of Warcraft server. Now, I'm not some WoW expert. In fact, I've never even played World of Warcraft. But apparently old content there became obsolete. And legally, on their own servers, you couldn't even have that vanilla experience. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Humans are nostalgic creatures by nature. If we have some good memories, and if it's tied to a certain game, or even just part of that same game, eventually we will have desire to relive those moments. Now, Guild Wars 2 case is not as big as this one. In fact, you can still enjoy like 99% of Guild Wars 2 content. But unfortunately, there is a tiny part that we don't have access to anymore. And that's Living World Season 1. If you are active Guild Wars 2 player, you probably know about this already. It's popular topic and it will show up every now and then on Reddit, Guild Wars 2 official forums, or even on YouTube. But people simply want to have access to old content. And I imagine if you are new player, you would have even bigger incentive, considering you never even had chance to experience it at all. Now me personally, I would love to see Living World Season 1 packaged somehow into Fractals. After all, Fractals are supposed to show us these big moments of Guild Wars history. But that's a topic for another video. So back to scaling. In all MMOs I've played before, when your character becomes high level and go back to lower level zones, what usually happens is you one-shot everything there. Now sure, this validates your progress, but by doing that you not only lose any fun that you might have in these zones, but you also could ruin potentially fun for new players. And this is especially the case for Guild Wars 2, because most of maps have meta boss events. So imagine you fight this big huge crystal dragon, and instead of experiencing all mechanics of it like game intended for you to, some high levels come and burn it in 10 seconds. Now to prevent this from happening, whenever you go to lower level zones in GW2, your stats will be scaled down appropriately. And yeah, I understand that you lose this validation of your progress, but I think that's insignificant when you realize that otherwise this content would become completely obsolete to you. What's great about scaling is that not only it can work against the players, but it can also work in our favor. And to give you an example, in previous expansion we had map called Dragon Stand. This whole map was based on huge meta event that was balanced for around 100 players. And at that time this was fine, because it was new and fresh map. But what about 2 years later? What about now when not so many players need anything from there? What about new players who want to experience this map? So this is where genius of scaling comes in. Now, instead of scaling the players, the game will automatically scale down the event. So for example, instead of spawning 20, 30, 50 mobs, it will spawn 15 or maybe 10. Or they will have less HP and defense, or they will have less attack and so on. And that's why you won't need any more 100 players. You could maybe do it with 40 or maybe even 30. Now don't get me wrong, it will still be challenging, maybe even harder. But at least it will not be impossible. And that is the goal of scaling, to prevent older content from becoming completely dead. And I think this is something that is widely underappreciated and overlooked in most of the MMOs, if not all of them. So that's why I felt it deserves a spot on my list. Now about the reward system, how does it fit into all of this? Well, ArenaNet is introducing new rewards constantly, and they are cleverly tying them up with the older maps. So recent case was addition of legendary trinket called Aurora. To obtain Aurora, you had to revisit Living World Season 3 maps and do a bunch of tasks there. Now, not only was this a lot of fun to me, but what surprised me more was to see so many players going back and replaying these maps. And again, just like with scaling, this was another example of how to preserve life of older content. Anyways, enough about that, and let's go to number 2, which is wardrobe, dice, and material storage. Now first let's talk about the wardrobe. Usually in other MMOs, if you wanna have several different armor looks, you will either need to purchase additional bunk space or you will need to create several alts that will serve as mules where you will dump all of these items. Now in GW2 this would be extremely difficult because there are so many skins to go for, and especially if you are a collectionist. Like for example, I have a friend whose goal was to unlock all of the stuff skins, but there are over 100 stuff skins. Imagine how clogged up your inventory would be if you had to put it all there. So ArenaNet decided to change this outdated and annoying way of managing your skins, and they introduced wardrobe. All skins that you unlock automatically go there, and if you wanna change looks of your characters, and hopefully on screen you will be seeing this, you just go to character panel, press wardrobe, select part that you wanna change, and pick one of the unlocked skins. And that's all. So simple, but so clever. Now, I understand some of the free MMOs out there can't really afford this system, and they are relying on purchases of extra bunk or inventory space. But that's another reason to stay away from those. Now, to make your character even more unique, you can dye each individual piece of armor, and some of them even have multiple channels, where you can dye them in different colors. Not only that, but all dyes that you unlock are account bound and are free to use whenever you want them. Personally, I've never seen such a rich coloring system in other MMO, and that's why I had to mention it here. Now, similar to wardrobe, material storage will automatically store all of your crafting items. And you probably know the pain of trying to organize all of this from the other MMOs. Like, I don't know, logging multiple alts just to find that one specific ingredients that you need. Or having to shuffle all of your inventory to find space for new crafting items. I don't know, man, but sometimes I just feel so lucky that I found Guild Wars 2, just because of details like this. But all of this pales in comparison to number 1 on this list, which is frequency and quality of updates. What usually ends MMOs for me is lack of content updates. And I'm talking about more than a year of content droughts. Sometimes no content at all. Developers would abandon their games in favor of newer titles, and just from that you can see how low level of passion they have for their own product. But this all changed with Guild Wars 2. Now what I will do, I'll tell you most of the content updates between 2 expansions, Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire, so you can get the feel of what you can expect in the future. First and most important, we had 6 Living World episodes. Each contained a unique new map for us to explore, as well as 6 story episodes. Now, these were smaller compared to the expansion arcs, but there was 6 of them, and when you combine them all together, it's quite considerable amount of story. Also, most of it was voice acted as well, which just show another level of quality compared to competition out there. Then each year we have seasonal events such as Halloween, Winter's Day, Lunar New Year and Super Adventure Box. Then let's add 4 raid wings, each containing multiple encounters, and judging by feedback of players, these were a huge success. Then out of nowhere they started adding these new side story updates and bunch of world events tied to these stories. And then on top of all, they made bunch of balance updates in all game modes, as well as few feature updates, added new fractal maps, PvP maps and some core wall vs wall changes. Now I probably missed some, but still just look at this picture. This is so much content just between expansions. I'm actually for the first time excited for the content updates after the expansion. This never happened in other MMO. And that would be all, I guess. That's my list of things that make Guild Wars 2 best MMO of today. Now, if you would like to see more content like this, please consider subscribing, sharing, liking and all that good stuff. If you wanna hear my opinion about some other stuff, Guild Wars 2 or MMO related, please leave the comment down below. And I guess I'll see you next time.